Chairman Nath, members of the Education Committee, good morning. I'm Jacob Jenkins. I'm here today representing Newtown Public School District and Magic City, Armada Public Schools Central High Campus. I'm here as a representative of the English Language Arts departments, specifically high school, and we are against House Bill 1461. I'm going to speak to you specifically today about the Common Core. And Common Core, in our view, is very beneficial to us as professionals and to our students. So one of the main things about Common Core is that it's built around critical thinking, building critical thinking in students. Our previous North Dakota state standards were more content-based, and what we're seeing in our schools is our students' thinking is raising to a higher and a higher level. We live in an age right now where if we see a picture with some cute words on it or a Facebook post, we believe it. This is a problem in our world, and we need to teach our students to evaluate and to be critical about the things that they see and determine if it's real or not. An example of the Common Core in motion. Several years ago, we were watching presidential debates, and we had just finished watching a speech by, at that time, President-elect Obama. And one of my students looked at me and said, "Mr. Jenkins, how can we trust what he said?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, he didn't tell us where he got his information from." And that is a key component of the Common Core. This critical thinking and citing your sources and using information and proving that that information is real. This student had this in the back of their mind, and they were able to recognize when information is being given to them that they need to critically think. And the whole Common Core is designed around this critical thinking. While there's content areas involved in there, this is largely our focus, is our critical thinking. While critical thinking is a major component, as a professional, where Common Core really shines is in its ability for teachers to collaborate. I've taught at Newtown High School the previous 4 years, and now I'm at Magic City Central High School in Minot. And at Newtown, we created our own curriculum based around the Common Core. And at first, we were worried about it because whenever you have something new, it's worrisome, it's scary to a teacher. So we started to create our units, and after the first few weeks, we were working on writing. And as a high school, we couldn't figure out how should we teach this writing, how do we build on this writing with our students. The Common Core is a tiered system. So understandings and concepts begin in kindergarten and they build on top of each other. Our previous state standards didn't have a system like that. So what we were able to do is we were able to go backtrack. So we went to our middle school teachers and said, "Hey, how are you teaching this? How are you using this standard?" And our middle teachers gave us an answer and went, "But we don't know what elementary school is doing, because when the kids come to us, they don't know how to do this." So then we went to our elementary teachers and we said, "How are you teaching this standard?" And what happened was we were able to collaborate as a school, and we were able to build that system using the Common Core so that we know when a kid starts kindergarten and they work their way up to high school, we're building on that knowledge. We're able to put building blocks in place so no teacher's an island unto themselves. You know, we're not just scattered Legos. We're actually building something in our students. And this is where Common Core really shines. The ability to have a common understanding. I can collaborate with teachers outside of my school, and we do. Because we're all working towards the same goal, these critical thinking skills. This is of utmost important, and what it's doing is it's building a community of teachers in our state that's going to affect our students and build a community of critical thinkers. No longer are we individual schools because we can have a conversation, and this conversation is built around a common ground. So in closing, we feel that the Common Core is of utmost importance to our students, to building our learning community as a state, and to developing critical thinkers within our students. With that, I would like to welcome you to ask any questions that you would like in regards to Common Core and how we implement it in our schools.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jenkins. It was it's very refreshing to hear from the classroom. We haven't had anyone speaking like that before. So, committee members, any questions for Mr. Jenkins?
Can you talk about the amount of time and resources it might have taken you to work with your elementary, middle, and high school staff in alignment?
Absolutely. This did not happen overnight. We've spent a good year just working on curriculum. How do we build curriculum and having conversations? At Newtown High School, we had Wednesdays, every Wednesday, where the entire district got together and met and would collaborate. And so it took a lot of time. As far as money, our school purchased some materials, but we largely created our own lessons and our own units based on Common Core. And I can't speak directly to how much they spent because I'm not involved in the financial aspect of that. But you know, when you're creating your own things, largely you're tied up resources, personnel.
Do you see Minot doing something similar or having the ability? Is there a difference between small districts and large districts to be able to have the resources to get all these levels of teachers to do that?
Sure. Well, I think we have to recognize that there's a difference between a district with 40 teachers and a district with 400 teachers. But it doesn't necessarily limit the conversation. It just means you have to be more organized in how that conversation happens. At Central High School, we have PLCs, interdepartment PLCs, so that we are collaborating. And we do have every so often where we have like all the English teachers from Magic City and all the grade levels, middle school, we get together and have those conversations. So it is possible, but it does require school districts to allocate some of that time. But we also use things like first class communities and you know, things like that so that we can have an ongoing conversation.
Mr. Jenkins, could you explain that PLCs for us, please?
Sure. A PLC is just professional learning community, and what it is, it's professionals getting together to collaborate to enhance their teaching.
You had mentioned how the Common Core State Standards has opened up collaboration amongst your staff. What new standards in place by our state open up same collaboration?
It might, but what we have to recognize, what was wrong with our standards before is they weren't tiered, they weren't built on each other. At least teachers didn't perceive it that way, where the Common Core is really a tiered system, and it's that building block, it's that ladder of success that really makes the Common Core shine. Now, if we take that Common Core and we throw it out, where does that leave our teachers until new standards are created?
Doesn't that give the teachers the ability to create those standards?
It does, but what do we do in the interim? What standards do we use? How do we collaborate?
I think it should be up to the individual school, the individual teacher, the individual district to make those decisions. I guess I would advocate that if HB 1461 does pass, that we look at a more broad-based standards and curriculum rather than specifics. So it would allow schools like Newtown or Minot to keep their Common Core if they like it, but a school, I represent many small schools in my district, and you know what, that Common Core might not be right for those schools. So to give choice for both, and with the goal being for them to still fall within that framework.
I understand where you're coming from, but I feel like you're confusing standards with curriculum. And I agree that every school has to create a curriculum that fits their students. But the standards, I think if we delve into them, we can see that these are general things that people need to know how to do. They're largely skill-based. The content areas are foundational type knowledges such as whole numbers, division, algebra, American documents, understanding the foundations of our country, you know, but largely it's skills. And we all agree, students need these skills. In every school district, a student needs to be able to say, here's my information, here's where I got it from, here's why it's important. And that doesn't matter if you're in a small school or you're in a large school, that's a life skill.
Some of the advanced math concepts we see in Common Core, are those life skills? Are those things that we all need to know? You know, I'm not sure that, I've been in the legislature for a long time, and been a successful business owner, and I'm not sure that I could pass that Common Core, so I'm not sure that it is a, relevant indicator of success.
See, again, you're confusing now standards with testing in the fact that whether you can or cannot pass. The standards themselves, and I'm only speaking of the standards today, the standards themselves are simply goals and skills for our students, whether or not you can pass a test. That doesn't affect whether or not these standards are good. Now, speaking to higher math, it's common for people to say, when will I ever need Algebra 2? When do I need to find the function of X or something like that? Our goal as educators is to provide a wide base of information, a wide base of skill and content and things like that. And even before Common Core, we felt that that was important. Algebra 2, specifically as you mentioned, has been part of curriculum in North Dakota forever. This isn't something that just sprang on us with the Common Core standards, and it's not something that our state or even our local education groups would say, oh, we don't need that anymore. So that isn't contingent upon the standards.
Is it possible to separate the standards from the testing? I think they walk hand in hand
Should
together.
they be aligned? Shouldn't the standards, the curriculum, and the testing be aligned? So we have standards here, we have the curriculum, we have what we are teaching in your classroom, and we have the testing. Shouldn't there be 100% alignment with that ideally? So
Absolutely.
If you fail a test, does that say that you are not proficient in these standards over here? Or if the curriculum was not adequately conveyed in a manner that you can be successful with that standards and curriculum?
Well, and you just described the way and the reason a standardized test should be used. Standardized test should be aligned to our standards, but a standardized test shouldn't determine what our standards are. And a standardized test should be used to say, where are we failing in our curriculum? Where are we failing in getting these standards across?
So I want to ask a couple questions, just a couple real quick. First off, I can understand the process when you're at Newtown of developing your own curriculum and how how long that took. What was the turnover, teacher turnover through that process?
That's a really good question. Teacher turnover at Newtown is quite high and varies from year to year. It could be anywhere from 5% to 1 year it was 72%. But that's not necessarily, and I think it would be fallacious to say that's because of standards. You have to take into consideration the economic status of Newtown, the kind of students that teachers are working with, the remoteness of the location, especially the oil field and the impact that has upon the school setting, the educational setting. So I think if we say, what's your turnover, and we use that to assume that that has anything to say about the standards, is really doing a disservice to both the school and the standards.
Well, that's great. And I'll let you know that I like the direction you're going when you're talking about separating assessment from the standards. I also like when you bring it back to allowing local control, where your teachers develop the curriculum. And I imagine that was a tough process, and I imagine there's probably, water cooler fights breaking out over that one. But also, what I want to know, two things. After they were in place, number one, how much empowerment did your teachers feel? Or how much buy-in was there after that? Having done it themselves and having had that ownership, but also, how did you assess it locally, whether or not what you did was effective, or you should have gone back to the way it was?
I think that's a great question. Teachers felt like they owned their material. We had, we had teachers who did not care for Common Core. And afterwards, they did. Because through creating our curriculum, like you said, we created ownership. And so what happened is, I'm not teaching standards, I'm teaching my material. And so we were able to personalize it, internalize it, and we tailored it to fit our students. So it ended up being a really good process. And it's an ongoing process as well, because like all curriculum, we find areas you need to improve. And so, it's an ongoing process. And we created our own formative and summative assessments, ways to gauge student achievement and their proficiency level against standards as well.
So those were all authentic, you would say?
Yeah.
So what, give me an example, say, you said you worked for what department?
English language department.
So give me an example of what type of assessment you used to see if what you guys did was working.
Like our own creative assessment?
Yes, your formative
Okay.
assessment, as you call it.
Sure. Well, formative assessments are usually just quick little things. So for example, if we wanted to assess your ability, if you're going to cite a text, we'd ask a question like, why did Lenny crush Curly's hands in a bunch of cement? And if a student responds with, oh, because he didn't like them, we would assess that maybe we haven't taught to use textual evidence well enough. And so we're going to include that further in our curriculum. If our students answer, well, because when we see further on and we quote from the book here, Curly did this to Lenny, and we can see that, oh, they're able to relate back and pull that text and use that. So that would be an example of just a quick formative.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? Well, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Jenkins, very much for giving us that little window into the classroom and explaining a couple of terms that I'm sure the committee really didn't understand. And the PLC piece seems to be something we maybe need to look into. And then we've got this formative as opposed to sort of summative or state tests. So I think we probably learned a few things about that. So thank you very much, Mr. Jenkins. Now we're going to keep the camera running for the reflection on this one. All right, so can we just start off then? Any feedback for Jacob on his performance in this?
Jacob, I appreciate your confidence as a teacher, because you didn't act like a teacher up there. You're very informed, and you showed that. And you were confident no matter what. And you had a response, but a response that made sense. That if I didn't have a clue what you're talking about, you informed me enough where I got a pretty good picture of it.
And I could tell that you're passionate about what you did in Newtown. That it really does carry out to the group today. And that passion, I think, would have really influenced and gave the committee some good information to take back and have conversations about. Fabulous.
I like the,
Go ahead.
I like just how you mentioned Facebook and you make it so much personal. You know, those personal stories are what kind of brings us in after hearing a few in a row now. And you kind of make it a lot more relatable to our own experience.
That's what I was gonna say. I thought your language that you used was very user-friendly for people who aren't in a classroom every day or even in schools seeing what's happening. You connected well with your audience.
And I would, we're not a bunch of scrambled Legos or a piece or something, so I thought that was a very good way of trying to describe what the comic was.
Well, you described it in really layman's terms, building upon each other, because I think that somebody who didn't really understand it, and I think most people on the education committee wouldn't really completely understand the concept of it. You really put it into understandable framework.
And you really were challenging some questions. And you really did a nice job in answering those questions.
Yeah, really good. You know, we have to be aware that the committee is not just on the education committee. They're involved in so many other things. And they're not always attending as well as we are today. You know, what I observed around is that they were texting, they were doing all kinds of other things around the room, and that can be very distracting for you as a speaker. So thank you for that, because I think you did engage as a layman. Any other comment?
I thought you had a pretty good defense in how you kept on differentiating the assessment and the standards, and you're real supportive of that idea, and you kept coming back to that. And I thought it was a good follow-through. So.
Hammered that home, really.
Yeah, you couldn't
And
miss
that
it.
isn't that one of the big issues that we've got to deal with in the state, to really help people understand how this is functioning within a school setting. Yeah. Is there anything we'd like to recommend to Jacob for future sort of presentations even?
The only thing I thought was, you give a lot of information without a lot of sources. That's
Okay.
one thing that I would have said.
So it was very based in the practical, the school, without any reference to something to substantiate, maybe. Yeah.
Moved on.
And is that true on his written piece as well?
Yeah.
Is,
I don't know.
all right, we might look at his written piece.
But actually, you know, that was kind of refreshing.
Yes,
Hearing from administrators
exactly.
and going through
Yeah,
teaching, hearing
okay.
it. All these different perspectives, it really lets you get
Yeah.
lots of levels of understanding. And we you gotta not just look at how this is affecting us, but you gotta look at it, it's how it's affecting the people that actually have to, are in the trenches having to implement.
100% agree, but in his presentation, one of the elements of Common Core is that you were able to quote your standards, and we use that long story. Didn't give up.
You're right.
I'm
You're right.
totally, certainly splitting hairs would be great.
But Jay, I think it's a good point to raise here, and if it were in the written piece, then that might help us, because we can take that away and we can look at that sort of later on. So I would recommend to you, Jacob, that you make sure that something is included in your written. I mean, I've had a quick glance through, maybe a little bit more to substantiate that. Sometimes it's even good to put some links so that people can follow up. You know, members of the committee can maybe go and have a look at what ASCD say, for example, about that problem with assessment. I think that's often good practice, yeah, so that we can investigate it further. Any other, sort of either positive things or things that just do. Now, his body language, let's just have a look at his body language, because it seemed to me it was like a little bit of Tim and a little bit of Scott. There was, there isn't, you were very relaxed, Jacob. I felt your body language was
That's
relaxed.
one thing I was going to say, very confident, comfortable,
Yes.
relaxed,
Yes.
personable, conversational, all those kinds
Absolutely.
of things that create connections with the
Yes.
committee members. I think that's a huge thing in my opinion.
Yes. Thank you, Mark, for saying that, because that was very important. I felt as though I could even catch him out in the hallway afterwards and say to him,
Exactly.
hey, I want to find
Yeah.
out more. Because often the committee members make themselves available before and after the hearing. And so if you've got your card to hand them at that point and to say, I'm going to be giving a testimony here and so on, and get those relationships so that I, as a member, could follow up with you afterwards, Jacob, and maybe even come and visit your school and that kind of thing. So I think, again, Jacob, very nice performance. Thank you very much. Yeah.